Every morning, retired police K9 Duke would frantically bark at the same oak tree, refusing to leave until his owner, Rick, pulled him away. After weeks of this obsession, Rick finally approached with an axe and peered into the hollow trunk. Duke's urgent barking suddenly stopped. The weathered badge that Rick pulled from inside hadn't been seen in 3 years. Every familiar routine began at dawn. Rick Bennett laced up his running shoes, clipped the leash onto Duke's collar, and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The German shepherd's ears perked up instantly, alert and ready for their daily jog through the wooded trail bordering their small town. Duke wasn't just any dog. For 7 years, he had served as one of the department's most decorated K9 officers. His career had been cut short when he sustained a severe leg injury. Rick, a former officer himself who had retired due to a back injury, had immediately volunteered to adopt Duke. Both of them had served the community proudly, and now they shared a special bond that only those who had worn the badge could understand. Their morning runs had become sacred, a way for both of them to stay connected to the discipline and routines they valued from their service days. But lately, something had been disrupting their peaceful routine. Duke's behavior had changed dramatically over the past few weeks. Every morning, without fail, when they reached a particular section of the trail, Duke would suddenly stop in his tracks. His focus would lock onto an ancient oak tree that towered above the others. The change in the dog's demeanor was instant, from relaxed jogging companion to rigid, alert working dog. Today marked the 23rd consecutive day of this strange behavior. Duke pulled toward the massive oak with such force that Rick nearly lost his grip on the leash. The dog's barking echoed through the otherwise silent forest, urgent, insistent. Rick tried the usual commands that had always worked during Duke's service years, but the dog refused to heel. At first, Rick had dismissed the behavior as animal instinct. But no, Duke's fixation wasn't random. It was targeted and growing more intense with each passing day. The barking had evolved into a pattern familiar to Rick from their days on the force. It wasn't aggression, it was an indication. Duke was trying to communicate something specific. When working cases, this was the exact behavior Duke exhibited when he had found what he was trained to find. That morning, Rick had come prepared. Alongside their water bottles and treats, he had packed a small axe. If Duke wouldn't let this go, then perhaps it was time to investigate properly. As they approached the tree, Duke immediately began his now familiar frenzy, barking while circling the massive trunk. After several attempts to calm Duke, Rick approached the tree. The base was clearly decaying, soft in spots where rain had accelerated the process. He began to chip away cautiously with the axe, creating a small opening at eye level. The commotion attracted attention. An elderly man appeared on the trail, approaching with careful steps. The man introduced himself as Samuel, a hunter who lived in a cabin not far from this part of the woods. He mentioned that his own hunting dog had been exhibiting similar behavior toward this same tree for months now. Samuel explained that it had started right after he witnessed someone rushing through these woods late one night about 2 years ago. With Samuel's help, they widened the opening in the trunk. Rick reached in cautiously, his fingers connecting with something that didn't belong in a tree: plastic. He pulled out a sealed plastic bag containing fabric that had been folded tightly. As Rick carefully unfolded the material, realization dawned on him. His hands began to tremble slightly. It wasn't just any fabric. It was a police uniform. Not just any uniform, but one with a badge number and nameplate still attached. A uniform that shouldn't have been stuffed inside a hollow tree in the middle of the woods. Rick immediately recognized the significance of what they had found. His police instincts kicked in, and he knew this discovery needed to be handled properly. He told Samuel they needed to keep this quiet for now, explaining that something about this situation didn't feel right. Rick called Detective Harris, a trusted friend who was still on the force. The detective arrived within the hour, parking his unmarked car at the trailhead to avoid drawing attention. When Harris examined the uniform, his face paled visibly. He informed Rick that the uniform belonged to Captain Mitchell, a respected officer who had disappeared without a trace 2 years ago. Mitchell had vanished in the middle of a major investigation, along with his wife and 2 children. Despite extensive searches and a multi-state investigation, no one had ever found them or determined what had happened. It was one of the department's most disturbing unsolved cases. Harris carefully examined every inch of the uniform, checking the pockets methodically. Inside a hidden interior pocket, they discovered something potentially valuable: a micro SD card wrapped in waterproof material. The tiny storage device had been carefully preserved, suggesting its contents were important enough to protect. Back at Rick's house, they reviewed the contents of the card on his computer. What they found left them stunned. The files contained a meticulous investigation into a sophisticated money laundering operation worth millions of dollars. Captain Mitchell had documented everything, all pointing toward one central figure orchestrating the entire operation. The evidence implicated none other than County Governor Walter Simmons, one of the most powerful political figures in the state. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Why had Mitchell hidden this evidence rather than submitting it through proper channels? What had happened to him and his family after that night? Had they fled, or had something more sinister occurred? Harris suggested they needed to approach this situation with extreme caution. If their suspicions were correct, they were dealing with corruption at the highest levels of local government. The governor had connections throughout law enforcement and the judicial system, which explained why Mitchell might have chosen to hide the evidence rather than trust the system. Over the next several weeks, Rick and Harris conducted a discreet investigation, recruiting only a small team of trusted colleagues. They collected witness statements, including Samuel's account. As they peeled back the layers of mystery, a disturbing picture emerged. Based on the evidence they gathered, they concluded that Mitchell and his family had been cornered by Governor Simmons and given an impossible choice: expose the operation and be killed, or take the money and disappear forever with new identities. Mitchell had chosen his family's safety, but he hadn't completely abandoned his oath to uphold justice. He had left behind the evidence in case someone worthy ever found it. The investigation culminated 3 months after Duke's discovery. The FBI, now fully briefed on the case, conducted a coordinated raid on Governor Simmons' estate. International authorities also found Mitchell in a village in Portugal. He revealed the full story. He explained that on that fateful night 2 years ago, he had tried burning his uniform and the evidence at that location, but fled when he heard Samuel approaching. In his panic, he had stuffed everything into the tree hollow, intending to return later, but never found the courage to come back to the scene. Finally, he decided to leave it there, hoping that the truth would be uncovered one day. The case broke wide open. Governor Simmons and 12 associates were arrested and eventually convicted on numerous charges, including money laundering, corruption, and conspiracy. Rick and Harris received commendations for solving the 3-year-old cold case that had haunted their department. As for Duke, he became something of a local celebrity. The story of the retired police dog who refused to ignore evidence of corruption made national headlines. It proved that even retired police dogs never truly stop serving justice. And though Duke couldn't tell his story in words, his actions had spoken volumes about loyalty, persistence, and the unbreakable bond between a dedicated officer and his K-9 partner. Have you ever witnessed an animal's instincts reveal something that humans had overlooked?